Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind. And today on this episode, we have Christine Deputy, who's the Chief People Officer at Pinterest. I'm sure a lot of you know what Pinterest is, but just in case, it's a visual inspiration platform that helps people shop products personalized to their taste, find ideas to do offline, and discover the most inspiring content. She's responsible for all aspects of Pinterest's human resources strategy, including talent management, leadership development, and benefits, and maintaining the company's high standards for workplace culture. Before Pinterest, Christine led HR at iconic brands like Nordstrom, Aviva, Barclays, Dunkin' Brands, and Starbucks. So we're really in for a master class in HR and people strategy.
That's what's so cool about it, Christine, and welcome to the show. I mean, you've worked at such awesome companies. What made you, if you don't mind my asking, go into HR? And if I understood it correctly, also you worked in different cities and different countries and different like products across the board. So I'd love to hear that career arc. How'd you navigate this?
So thanks. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk with you both and with the audience. Let's see, why human resources? I did undergrad in psychology, and I did some work in education, and I loved the combination of people and sort of human beings and development and business. I got really energized when I got a chance to get into a business environment where, you were trying to figure out, well, how do we hire the right people and what kind of structures do we need and what's the business objectives and how do we make this all affordable? So I enjoy the combination. And I also like the fact that on any given day, you never know what's going to happen because it's people. So that's interesting to me. And I love the different industries. So as you mentioned, I worked in the travel industry. I worked for two coffee companies, two incredible coffee companies, banking, insurance, and high fashion. Retail fashion, which was a lot of fun. And
That
now,
was Nordstrom's, right?
that's Nordstrom, and now Pinterest, which is my technology experience. And yeah, I've loved being able to live in different countries. I've lived in Hong Kong, I've lived in Toronto, Canada, I've lived in London twice, Boston, Seattle, and now San Francisco. So I'm an interested person, I guess I would say, and I have learned things in all these different industries. And hopefully, every time I start something new, I'm going to learn from the environment, but I also get to bring some expertise and hopefully some wisdom to the process.
Have you found out, is it a huge difference between, let's say, a Barclays, which is an investment bank, Nordstrom's department store, Dunkin' Donuts? They seem so different, but at the end of the day, is it behind the scenes kind of very similar to be, a chief people officer?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, at the core, human beings are human beings. So we come to work, we want acceptance, we want connection, we want community. We want to feel like we're contributing and we're valued for that contribution. Um, and so those things are they're like underneath, they're like those principles that are at the very core of people at work, right? What's interesting to me is then you have these overlays where you have different communities or different identities of people who come to those different industries. And so, for example, when you look at a retail industry, you've got a corporate group and a technology group, but then you have a very big group of folks who are in that frontline worker environment, and many of first time jobs, and that has a very unique sort of flavor to it and set of complications. In a different environment like where I am now at Pinterest, you don't have any of that frontline worker necessarily. You've got a big sales organization, a big engineering organization, and so there are some different motivators and different personalities that come to that. And so that makes it really interesting because now you're kind of saying, well, what's the different kind of seasoning I need to add to this? What are the different kinds of combination of tools that are going to help us create this environment where these kinds of workers, these kinds of individuals are going to get really excited and energized and motivated.
Now with Pinterest, it's more tech driven, which is a departure from some of the other places. Are you finding like the coming into there that what they're asking for, the compensation, is that something that you have to kind of say, wait, this is a different world and I have to kind of adjust and figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. I mean, the thing that's interesting, so I came directly from Nordstrom to Pinterest, so we can
Mm.
kind of contrast those two environments, right? Nordstrom had an employee group, a technology group of over 33,000 people. So I think we got up to 3,500 at one point. So that technology group had a very similar set of profiles of jobs that we have at Pinterest. Actually, it was a bigger group of people than what we have at Pinterest. Now, what's interesting is there were a lot of similarities. So I knew a lot about the job groups and around the compensation structures and some of the practices. But coming into it and kind of like being completely deaf, what the thing I had to learn was, well, how do we make money? Because in retail, how you're making money through that, what the process is around the products, et cetera, et cetera. Here it was about, okay, how do I learn the business? Because it's really important to understand the business so that then you can say, okay, this is a technology group, but there's also sales and other communities, other job groups. And so for me, a lot of it was learning about the business, less about learning this particular, group of workers and kind of what their unique, desires are. The other piece that I've had to really learn and listen is we're in a different stage of our growth. So Nordstrom's actually 100 years old, fourth generation family members that are still involved in the business, even though it's public. Here, we're not that old. We'd only done an IPO, 5, 6 years ago, not even that. And everything's sort of really new and we're still early stages in trying to figure out all of our systems and processes. Our culture's evolving really fast. So that's been something that I've been really trying to lean into and say, okay, well, what are the unique attributes of this kind of workforce and this kind of community? And how do I make sure that I'm leaned in and listening and understanding where they are and what their needs are?
So that's exciting because I could see a place like Nordstrom, and I'm not saying they did this, but I could just put aside Nordstrom, the name. But if you have a company that's been around for so long, it could be easy, like, we've always done it this way. Let's keep doing it this way. Let's not rock the boat. But now where you are, you're like, wait, this is 5 years old since we IPO'd. We're newborns. We're young. We're figuring
Although,
stuff out. Gotta be
although
awesome.
nobody wants you to move their cheese. Let's be really honest. I mean, even if I've only been doing something for a year, I still don't want you to change it. So whether it was a year or 100 years, to some extent, everybody's a little bit like, well, no, this is my stuff. And I like my stuff and don't make me change my stuff. So there was some similarities, but you're absolutely right, Jack. That is a different environment.
And how do you deal with this now? Because I've seen, with all the layoffs going on, particularly in the tech sector, and I don't know, Rick, what's like the last count? Because I know you guys have a counter, like 100,000 plus in January, or what's?
It's over 110,000 in just the last 6 weeks, or the first 6 weeks of 2023.
Crazy.
Mhm.
So like as an
Wow.
HR professional, how do you help like your staff, particularly young people who haven't been going through this? People who are like old like me, you've seen the dot-com boom and bust, the financial crisis, all that kind of stuff. So after a while, you just become, hardened. But if you're a kind of a Gen Z, like your mind has to be blown. Like, what's going on here? Like, how do you help
Yeah.
them with their mental health, their emotional well-being,
Yeah.
having trust, when they see everyone laid off, like, what's going on?
Yeah. No, it is. It's a challenge. And I think there's an easy kind of response in some ways for me because I'm similar, I've gone through these things before. I've seen the ups and downs. I've seen, I remember early days at Starbucks when we were like, oh, the company's not going to make it, and you think now, of course,
Wait,
I mean, my
I don't
gosh,
mean to
you
interrupt.
can't imagine a world
Was
without
there a point
Starbucks.
there, like, where
Well,
was
yeah,
almost?
I mean, I remember there were days when we were, early days when, we had been growing, but we made decisions and they didn't work out, and the stock, was really low, and we all had options in the time. So it's easy to kind of reflect back and go, oh no, I've seen it all, I've been there, you don't know, you don't understand. But the reality is for anybody who's, in their career, they've been spending the last 8 years or so just growth, 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 growth. And I didn't experience it, right? So if I'm that person, I've never experienced it. And I didn't plan for it. I didn't think it was going to happen to me. And so it feels just as jarring, it feels incredibly jarring. So for me to say, hey, trust me, it's going to be fine, it doesn't feel really good to those individuals. At Pinterest, when we think about our workforce, we do try really hard to make sure that we're creating a really positive environment that's focused on emotional well-being. We think of that in our product and we think about that in our workforce. And I personally, that really resonates with me. So we have resources we have free tools like Lyra, Ginger, Calm, Clio. I mean, there's a lot of places that we give benefits around these things. We have a lot of really good parental benefits and pieces like that. We also have created things that other resource groups, we have an employee emotional well-being. It's called a Pinspiration group. You'll appreciate we have Pinspiration groups, which are inspiration groups. And then we have Pinclusion groups, which are employee resource groups for different groups that different identities. You'll get used to all my pins. So that's something that'll be thematic. But all of those are to build community and connection and support. And what we find is that that's really important. And then I think in these moments, companies need to think about, we go out and we recruit and we say, come and work with us and you're going to love it here. And here's how we're going to treat you and you're going to have this great experience. When you go to say goodbye, you also need to be really respectful and thoughtful. And I think trust is built through your actions, not through your words. And it's really important, I think, for companies to say, what do we stand for? What are our values? So if we're going to have to say goodbye to some of our workforce, that we do it in a way that they feel respected. So I think that's the way I would kind of characterize as I think about it. Like, would I feel good about how this individual was treated? And that's hard. It's not an easy kind of thread to pull, because there's this real desire for transparency out there. And we watch blind, I watch blind, I look and I see, and there's a lot of predictions and this is happening, that's happening. And we're trying to make decisions so that we can then talk to individuals. And it's a fine thread to pull.
I'm curious. So I think you might have seen this firsthand, but Pinterest is one of the most popular companies on Blind. It's one of the top companies that people want to work for. I mean, how did you create that kind of culture or that reputation, right? There are so many companies out there that are probably, to be quite candid, jealous of that reputation that you've been able to build.
I can't take credit for it. Obviously, this is
I'll take credit for it.
Oh, come on. No, I mean, listen, I came in to work with Ben, who is our founder, and an incredible group of leaders and an incredible culture. And, we've been really leaned into, we went through COVID, we had a lot of challenges. I mean, that's just real. And what's been really important to me and the executive team is, as we come out of COVID, is really making sure that we're grounded in our roots. So we're not trying to be Google, we're not trying to be Facebook, we're not trying to be Nordstrom, we want to be Pinterest. And so we spent a lot of time in the last year or so digging into what are the values of the company and how do we align the employee experience to that set of values, and how does that align to what the product is that we're trying to create. Because when you get those three things in the right place, you can do great things both for the people who work for the company and for the customers, the pinners who leverage our platform, and for our advertisers who are on there. And so spent a lot of time listening. We did a lot of survey work, a lot of debates, making choices. And I think over time, people feel excited to be here. They feel like I can be myself. Like, we talk about be you here. And that's one of the things that we think about, which is, can you come in and feel like you can be fully yourself and you'll be accepted for that? And I think that's really important.
Can you give us kind of a fly on the wall look at those debates that you have? Like I think it's a relatively new phenomenon where uh, chief people officers, heads of HR, heads of recruiting do sit on the C-level suite. They are executives in their own right. And they have that back and forth, maybe sometimes with finance or even the executives or even job function leaders. Um, how do you best advocate for your employees, and what are you saying, and what are kind of the points that you bring up?
Well, I think one of the things I think about the fact that my role is is it's the unique piece of the job that I do is about how do I organize and structure the environment and the way we work together in a way that will help us achieve the business objectives, right? And ultimately to grow, because we want to grow, we want to be continuing to grow in a really positive way, because that gives everybody an opportunity personally to grow and achieve their own personal objectives. So I have to balance advocating for employees with actually thinking about the organization as a whole. And it's not always easy, but some of the things, like we had debates, I'll talk about our work model called PenFlex. And we had a lot of debate about hybrid or work in the office. Can they work from home? How many days in the office? Which jobs work in the office? Which jobs don't? And we had no less than, 15, probably at least 15 executive team meetings where we ended up in that topic. And this was over a period of months where we
Right.
kept coming at this. And I was trying to design a system that would work for everybody. And ultimately, where we got to in these debates was, okay, we all agreed. What do we agree on? And so that's one of the things I try and get to is, as an executive team, what do we all agree with? Well, we all agree that we want to be transparent, we want to be consistent, we want to be fair, right? We all agree on that. Then we started to think, all right, we also need to have a workforce that can work. Like, can we be productive? Because at the end of the day, you can be all nice to everybody, but if you can't create the product, you're in trouble. So we had that debate, and we have to balance those two needs. And then we had this debate about, like, why, we kind of dug into, and I kept asking this question, which was why. Like, people were like, well, we need the engineers in the office. I was like, okay, why? Or we need the salespeople in the office. Why? Because what I feel is really important is that I have to be able to authentically, genuinely answer the questions for our employees. And I want our executive team to always be able to do that. And I worked at Starbucks. I worked with a guy named Jim Alling, who is a really cool leader. And he used to say, and actually Howard Behar probably was the first one who said this. He was one of the founders. And he used to say, nothing sounds like the truth, but the truth. And so when we had these debates, we were like, well, if we're going to make people come into the office, why are we going to do it? We better be really clear and say exactly why. And so in the end, what we decided was, in order for us to create this environment, we said, well, you have to earn the commute. You have to be really clear and ground all these decisions in the business and the work. And ultimately, we came up with our PenFlex program, which is really about, we give sort of autonomy to leaders in different groups, and they choose what are those activities that they want to have in person. Those are high fidelity activities. It might be team building, strategic planning, problem solving. And then what activities where they don't have to have high fidelity, where we can do it in a virtual way. You don't have to be human being face to face or in person. And those they can do virtually. Things like weekly touch bases, team, status checks. And we're working with that system. And we've said we want to have the same rules for everybody, in that, any given quarter, how often you're going to have to come into the office. And those are the same rules for the executive team as they are for the first, the intern that is just starting next week, So we're trying to be very, very clear and ground it in the work. So those are some of the debates we had. And those are some of the challenges that I kind of asked the questions. And 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 I have to bring data to the conversation. So we look at, are we losing people? Are they staying? Are they productive? All those things bring a lot of data to the conversation. But then ultimately we have to lock arms and feel confident that we've got to the right place. And then still listen and be ready to change if you need to.
It's interesting you talked about the data because I was going to ask that. Do you, because it seems like you're doing great things there, with taking care of the mental health, the emotional well-being, instill trust. Sounds like, offering psychological safety and really being thoughtful about how people could work, whether remote, hybrid, what have you, and not just, treating it, like, nope, you got to get in like some companies do. Do you see that helps with retention when people, because they feel like, oh, wow, they're giving we're asking for feedback, we're doing surveys, we're giving them calm and all these other things. Do you notice, does that make a difference compared to, let's say, your peers that have just cycling through people?
Yeah, I mean, some organizations will have a workforce strategy that says it's okay if there's turnover. And we've collectively as an executive team, we believe that we would like to retain our workforce. So we're working really hard. We're not getting it perfect. Turnover for us in Q1 last year, like everybody in the industry, I mean, it was a spin. I mean, people were running from place to place and there was a lot going on. Our turnover has come down dramatically, but I don't think it's necessarily, I can say, oh, that's just because of the work that we're doing. But we are leaned in to retaining the people because we believe that institutional knowledge, that knowledge of our technology, the skills and capabilities that we grow and develop here, these are part of the value proposition that we can then offer to a pinner. And having the same leader for 12 months or 2 years means that I'm going to grow much more quickly than if every 6 months I have a new boss.
Mm-hmm.
And so stability is something that I'm also super leaned in on. We haven't been able to get quite where we want to, but we actually measure how many leaders have individuals worked for in any 12-month period, because you don't want to have to keep starting over, and to develop and grow, like, you need to have a trusting relationship. So we are monitoring that as well. And that has a very high correlation to retention.
This is not a fair question to ask because, like, we don't have a crystal ball, but do you think moving forward, now that, we've seen so many layoffs, hiring freezes, and we just got past the great resignation, acting your wage, quiet quitting, rage applying to jobs. Do you think moving forward, things will be like people might be a little bit more cautious before they move and say, you know what, I'm just going to keep my head down, work hard, keep my job? Do you think we're going to get into a different type of environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there was a data point I read at one point that 50% of the people that changed jobs in 2020 wish that they hadn't,
The
because I
great
think they might have
regret, right?
the great regret. I think
regret.
they might have like rage applied, which I've never heard that term, but I love that, rage
Oh my God.
application.
On TikTok, they have a term for everything. It's great.
I love it. It's so funny. I love that. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. I wish we could really help people think about, you know, that they have choices, and that they should be thinking about those choices in a really in a thoughtful way. And that it's not just about the dollar today, but it's about, where do you want to be 3-4 years from now? And what kind of work do you want to do? And what kind of people do you want around you? And I do think that there are going to be ups and downs, and we do have to be less speed oriented. Like, I do really worry, like, it's about this rapid, like, I want to be able to I don't feel good right now, so I need to move. And we've enabled people to move so fast that sometimes when you don't feel good in a job, that might be that you're actually growing and learning. So, an analogy, right? The first time you get on the treadmill, anybody's done anything, the next day you don't feel so good, right? And the day after that, you feel even worse. But if you go and you keep doing it, you over time build muscle, but it actually is a little painful to build muscle, but you build muscle and you get better. Well, when you're in a job in a company, you're going to have bad days. Like, we should realize that and acknowledge that. And growing and developing new skills is going to be hard. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to feel embarrassed. You're going to feel uncomfortable. And I want us to help the workforce feel okay about feeling that way and not immediately feeling like, I got to jump. I got to jump. I got to move. And I do worry a little bit that we've created some of that dynamic through all this movement and all this drama. And I think, you know, I do think that you learn a lot if you stick around for a little while and through those hard times. Now, don't stay a place that you're miserable. I do feel like sometimes there's paid hostages. I mean, I actually see them on Blind when I look around sometimes, people that are like, I hate where I am. And I'm like, well, why are you still there? You're not a hostage. Like, like I've been there myself. Like, I've had jobs where I was like, oh my God, I cannot stay here. This is not for me. And that's okay, because it was great for other people. It just wasn't for me at that time in my life. But like, you have choices. So you don't want to move so fast that you don't give yourself a chance to grow and learn. But on the other side, if you're really unhappy, like, make a plan and reach out and find a way to make a move. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a long answer to your question, but
it opens the door, Chris. It's really interesting. Like, Rick, do you think I'm blind? And Christine, what you've seen, that sometimes you just get caught up in the status of it. I'm working at Google, I'm working at Amazon, I'm working at Apple, and I hate it because of whatever reasons. But you don't want to move, because if you move, you lose your identity and you lose your bragging points. And, and then if you go somewhere else, like your family or friends go, oh, you left Google to do what? Oh, okay. Is that maybe what happens? Like, you get that societal pressure? And
yeah, I mean, I can answer from my perspective. I think absolutely the comparison game is brutal today.
yeah,
It's what people learn on, social media, and it's really hard. And I remember, like, I mean, I've had that in my career times when I've been like, well, that person got promoted before me. I should have gotten that job, or why didn't I get that job? Or maybe I should work for that company. And, it's really hard because it is a world where we are very able to show who we are in a way that it's just a picture or it's just a video, and people are comparing. And listen, even before social media, people were comparing, like, you got a new car and you got a new house and whatever. The best advice I've ever been given is run your own race. And it never struck me more than when I had just had my second child. I have two kids. I have a son and a daughter. And my daughter was a baby, and I was at home on maternity leave, and I was sitting there with the baby in my lap, and I got a call from my boss, and I was on maternity leave, but she wanted to let me know that this colleague of mine was taking this big job. And, we wanted to let you know while you were on maternity leave, but we're so excited. And I was like, I got off the phone with her and I was so mad. Like, that was my job and I should have gotten that job. And why didn't I get that promotion? And I was furious. And then I had to look down and realize, like, no, it's okay. Like, this is life. This isn't a moment. Your job is one slice of the pie of your life, your community, your family, your friends. There's a lot of parts of your life, and your job is one part of your life. It becomes your whole life. Then when you don't have it, what do you have? And so that was a really visceral moment for me, because I literally had a baby on my lap and I was like, oh, perspective, hello. So that's my advice for folks that are comparing, because, like, you're never going to win that game. I always say this as an HR leader, somebody's always going to make more money than you. You're always going to work for somebody, even the CEO, I guess, unless you're a founder. But as a CEO, they report to the board. If they're in a public company, they report to the shareholders. Everybody has a boss, and there's always going to be somebody who makes more money than you. So you have to look at your own position in absolute. Do I feel good about what I'm getting paid? Do I love the work I'm doing? Do I feel valued? And is this leading me where I want to go so I can live my life?
Well, isn't there a really good quote, like something like, comparison is the thief of joy, or something of that nature? Does that
That's
sound
right.
right? Where Because it is, because that's right. That really does get a lot of people where
Yeah.
you feel like, wow, like you said, oh, I should have got that job. And it eats, and it's easy to let it eat away at you.
Well, I mean, our site, when we think about Pinterest, one of the things that we're really proud of is that the environment is actually quite, it's designed to be an environment that's very positive and very sort of inspiring. And not, I think it's really important that, when we look at each other's pins or you get to see what someone else has, brought onto the site, it's done in a way that says, oh gosh, I'm getting inspiration from you. I'm not comparing my thing to you. And that's really important. And I think we need more of that in the world today and less, oh, look at, I got so many likes or whatever. And that piece of it, I think, is we're seeing in the studies, the Surgeon General is doing a lot of work. We're talking about, young people coming, really struggling from a mental health standpoint.
Big time.
And
Yeah.
a lot of that is being impacted. It's being caused by some of this comparison, this judgment, and this very sort of free for all environment.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of, especially for young women, um, it's what I say is really, from a mental health perspective, it really is harming them.
Yes. Yeah. So we're really very focused in on that. And I think we all need to be very focused in on that. And again, are we putting the support systems in place? Are we, are we pushing ourselves as we're doing design on these kinds of products? And keeping that emotional well-being at the forefront.
No, I appreciate your advice, Christine, because it seems like, through our conversation, you're starting from these first principles, right? Like it seems very foundational, very grounded. And I mean, to Jack's point, right? I think it's very easy when you don't have that kind of solid footing, that like first principle to turn to in terms of like, well, what is my goal with my career? Or what do I actually seek for my professional development? That it's very easy to say, oh, well, I'm just going to look what's in front of me. Maybe that's on Blind. Maybe that's my pay stub, right? Maybe that's my peers and what they're doing. I Do you have any other kind of like foundational advice for people's careers? Maybe they're early to mid and they're trying to go to the next level. What should they look out for?
Um, a couple of things these are sort of hard earned learning. So I didn't kind of magically learn some of these things. These are things that I had to go through experiences with. Um, One is that I think it's really important to have goals in all areas of your life, not just career goals. So if you're sitting down and you're making a plan and say, where do I want to be a year from now, or where do I want to be 10 years from now? I encourage people to look at that as sort of a circle and think about, where do I want to be with my family? Where do I want to be with my relationships? Where do I want to be with my community? Where do I want to be financially? Kind of really start to envision that life that has more aspects to it than just career. And then I firmly believe that your career and the work that you're doing should be in service to the life that you love. That's how we think about that from a people standpoint. That's part of our strategy.
Oh
And it's in
wow.
service to the life you love, not in service to itself. And then I would say, I think first and foremost, you go to an organization because of the culture and the values and the work that you're going to do versus they're going to pay me the most, because that paycheck can be great and that's wonderful. And there's nothing wrong with having a good paycheck and knowing what your value is. But it has to be the other pieces too, because every single day you're going to go in and you're going to need to do that work. And I think it's really important that you want to do the work that they are putting in front of you. I think you find leaders that you trust. And when I would interview with folks, I would ask questions like, how do you approach the development of your team? When I'm being interviewed for a job, like I talked to Ben, when he and I talked about it, I said, well, how do you think about developing the team? And what is your commitment? How much time do you spend with the people that work for you? And here's what I expect. I like to have a one-on-one every 2 weeks. And I want to be able to get feedback. And are you willing to give me feedback? And I think it's really important if you're not, you got to ask for what you want too when you're having that interview and finding out how do they do what they do, because leaders are really important. The leaders that I've had a chance to work with have made my career. They have made me the leader that I am today. Um, and then I think the other part of it is be patient. I always thought I was ready for promotion before I was. I'll say that again. I always thought I was
Wow.
ready for a promotion before I was. And there are a lot of times when I'm like, I reflect back and I think, thank goodness they didn't give me that job. Now, I also was always scared to death when I finally did get the job and thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I can do this one, right? But there is a thing about, I kind of think about growth as in careers as kind of a couple of year cycle. Like the first year you're doing that job, you don't really know what's going on and you're not sure what's coming around the corner, and you're learning the environment, the people, and where do I get my, where do I go to the bathroom? I mean, it's everything, right? That first year is hard. Second year, you're like, oh, I got this. I think I'm really cool. You kind of get in the groove, you know what's coming around the corners, you've been through things, you kind of know who people are. You're like, okay, this is good. It's the third year that you're taking it to the next level. You're taking it up a notch. You're like, now I'm going to show you like that next level. And the jobs, those, like, let's say 3 years, the more junior you are, maybe that's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. The more senior you are, it's going to be 6 months, 6 months, 6 months, or even 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Those jobs are bigger. The bigger the job, the longer it's going to take you to kind of get impact. And it is in those next years, the second time you do the thing, that you have a chance to really show that you're capable and demonstrate that you can improve on it year over year. So just because you did something once doesn't mean, oh, I got it, I've done it, I can check it off the box. No, actually, you might need to do it more than once. So, I had a leader who used to say, one time is not a trend, and we're looking for trends.
I love that you
I
say
love what you're
that.
saying, Rick. I don't know if anyone ever mentioned this before in the other podcast. Christine, what you're bringing up is this. It seems like, I don't know if you do with your company, or maybe you could, to actually talk to the staff to tell them what you've been saying here. Because I think a lot of people, particularly young people who don't know what to expect, if they would hear from someone like yourself or their manager or what have you, say, hey, this is what to expect here to manage expectations. First 6 months, whatever, maybe you're not going to know what the heck to do. You'll be scared, afraid, nervous, and that's normal, natural. Then the next piece, this is what's going to happen and what's going to happen. And first of all, do you do something like that? Like either
We
informal
are,
or?
well, we haven't had at Pinterest, again, we're still pretty young. We haven't had this career journey, this career framework that we need. And we're actually doing that right now. We're building that career framework, and we're going to start to help people understand, like, what can you expect in year one at this level, and how long does it take you to get to that next level, and what are the things that we're working on. And I do think we've had a great discussion around the technical requirements for jobs, but what we haven't necessarily talked about is, what is the development experience going to feel like. And
Yeah.
that's something that I'm trying to layer in, and my team is working really hard on having that curriculum, that development cycle, so that people can understand and expect it. And how do you onboard someone? And like, I was very clear. And by the way, it doesn't matter how good you are and how senior you are, your first year in any job, like my first year at Pinterest, I mean, it was hard. And there were days when I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck am I doing? And did I make the right decision? And holy, this is hard. These people, like, I don't know what they're talking about. They're talking in Pinterest terms, and what is that? And I knew it, so I didn't feel scared. It was hard work, but I wasn't afraid. I felt safe. And I also felt like I had confidence in Ben and others that they had my back. And so that's why I say it's really, I think we can do better jobs of educating and supporting people, especially early in career, to expect it. At Nordstrom, it was very grounded. It was a very clear thing. And we did that as people really knew kind of what they should expect. It was something that was really embedded in the culture. And they had a very strong culture of development of leaders that's how they grew that business. And so it was very much part of the DNA. And I think we can bring that concept into technology at Pinterest, into this industry in a way that I don't think it has existed in the same way it does in retail. Because when you're in retail, there's a different kind of um, uh, speed, to be honest, about how you're growing that company because it's a more physical growth than a
Right.
systems growth. Does that make sense?
I think it's brilliant. I think, Rick, what do you think it, because I can't recall speaking to anybody, whether, on like the 50 episodes we had so far, but just as executive recruiter, like for 25 years, like they don't have that kind of program. And the way you walking through them, it's almost like the light bulb went on. It's like, oh my God, that should be almost like mandatory at companies because you don't know what to expect. And if you don't know what to expect, it's easy to quit. It's easy to just to get disengaged. It's easy to, act your wage or just feel frustrated because you don't know. No one's managing your expectations. But if you
Yeah.
set it forth, I think it would help with retention, and then it will help with recruiting and getting people, because then they'll hear about like, oh, if you go there, you're going to know what's expected, what to do. Are you going according to plan and so forth? And that
Yeah.
would probably cut down on probably a lot of the churn, a lot of people moving and having, like you mentioned before, the great regret.
Yeah. Well, the first and that turnover in that first, short period of time where people feel panicky and they feel
Yeah.
anxious.
I think it's a good approach. I was at one company before Gusto where they outlined the expectations because there was this feeling that some people got to kind of they got to this middle level and they feel like they've plateaued, right? Not realizing that in some cases it's okay if you want to stay on the individual contributor track and you don't want to be a manager, and that level is going to be your terminal level, but you're a rock star at coding or whatever it might be. And the alternative was there were a lot of people at Gusto that just rose through the ranks so quickly, especially at startup speed. And now it's starting to slow, right? They're thinking, oh, well, I got promoted in 1 year, 18 months. And, they're looking at the next year or the next 18 months and expecting it to be the same, not
Mhm.
realizing, oh gosh, my scope has gotten larger. The expectations are a bit higher as well.
Mhm.
And I think they did a great job in terms of kind of just setting that expectation of saying, oh no, it's gonna take you a while, and that's a good thing, right? Because you're gonna learn a whole lot and you're gonna do a lot more things in just maybe, a few months or even a year or two.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's a pyramid, right? So as you
Yeah.
go up the ladder, there's fewer jobs and the
Right.
jobs are bigger. And so it's going to take you there's fewer roles, so it's going to take you longer each time to create mastery and then create improvement and then be ready for the next step. And I also I do this, tell people, everybody wants to go up, 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 but the higher up that ladder you get, the more your butt shows. So if you make a mistake when you're more junior, like, nobody may notice it and you can recover from it really easily. When you're in a very senior role, you make a mistake, you can have a huge impact on both the organization, the people that work for you, and for yourself. So I'm a big proponent on make a lot of mistakes really early and often, learn, spend your time to get really confident before you take that next step because you really it's hard to recover when you're more senior. It's easier to recover from mistakes because the consequences of your mistakes are much smaller. And you need to make mistakes to learn. You can't learn without that. You can't, like, nobody's perfect.
Yeah, I love that reminder. It's certainly something that I had to learn the hard way. Like
Yeah.
early on, I just wanted to like seem like I grow up faster or do more
Yeah.
things, get promoted faster, more quickly. And I fell flat on my face. There was one promotion that I probably shouldn't have gotten. And it was a very how do you say this? Public lesson.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, right? I mean, we all have one, at least.
Right. And so I'm thankful for that experience now, but oh boy, certainly in that moment,
All
you know,
right, all right. Now you got us intrigued. Do you want to share what happened, or no? You want to?
no, it was very early on. So my career out first job out of college was in politics. And you know, when you're in politics and you studied political science, you have that degree in hand, you think, oh, I want to write policy, I want to create laws, I want to be in the halls of City Hall and Congress or what have you. But you know, looking back, it's very similar to being an athlete on a sports team, right? Like you go out on Sunday, everyone sees the result, they're very invested, they're very passionate, and I made a very public mistake that, you know, as a campaign manager, even a junior one, it was in the newspaper.
Wow.
And
Oh,
it wasn't just my reputation, but it was, you know, my candidate's reputation. And that did not go well, right?
Mhm.
And you know, it's funny. And in politics, no one gets fired, you know, everyone resigns. So at the young age of 23, I resigned to spend time with my family, as one does in politics.
Right. Oh my.
Oh my gosh.
But it was like a very hard lesson, right? And I needed that ego check. I needed that reality check of, yeah, you just can't. You, it's okay to not know everything, right? And
Yeah.
I
Good for
give you credit
you though,
for
right? You
bringing it
made
up.
that mistake. You made that mistake when you didn't have, maybe, a house payment, or maybe you didn't
right.
have like all these people that you're responsible for, right? So again, that's why I really encourage folks to, you know, learn and take that time. And that doesn't mean you have to go slow, but you know, you have to, you do have to make some mistakes, and you do have to be willing to listen to feedback and learn. So I think that's great. That was nice of you to share.
Yeah, I wish I had made that mistake with kind of my lower stake campaigns. Like one of the campaigns that I was doing was like, yes, we should have clean water in San Francisco. Like I feel like that campaign you could probably make some speech mistakes or errors, and probably less of a risk, right?
Yeah,
than than an
absolutely.
actual person running for office.
I'm glad you brought it up, Rick, because what I see, people always fail at careers and do dumb things. And you don't want to talk about it, but like, it's very rare that somebody could just always succeed. You know what I mean? Like go
Right.
straight line up. Did some people do that? Sure, but it's such the exception. Most people, just do like dopey things and make mistakes and whatever. And I think it's good to talk about it. This is what one of the great things about doing this kind of podcast, because you could just share it. Hey, yeah, this happens. It's not just you. We all do it. We all make really
Yeah.
boneheaded like mistakes and problems because we're human. And then we just learn from it and move forward.
And even the people who you think just rose to the, glories of, they had a lot of mistakes. They might have just done them in a way that, you weren't aware of them. But I think most leaders have stories of, I don't think I've ever met a leader who couldn't share a story of where they've had a failure. And, you know, actually, I don't know that I would want to work for someone who wasn't willing to share a story of how they failed. Because from an empathy standpoint, you know, if you're literally going to sit across from me and tell me that you've never made a mistake and you've never failed, and that feels like a really not unsafe environment for me to be in, because I am going to make a mistake. And in a lot of our leadership development programs, we'll coach people to share their mistakes, because it does create a safe environment. And as a leader, you're only as good as the information that you have. The decisions you make every day are only as good as the information you're getting. And you're not going to get good information if you haven't built a safe and positive relationship with the people around you. And so imagine if you don't have good relationships and you don't have a safe environment, and somebody's making a mistake, they're not going to tell you. And then you're going to make decisions not knowing, and that can be devastating to a company or a team or an organization. And so, you know, you want the information, because if you have more information, you're going to make a better decision, and the team's going to be more successful. So, I love the whole, fail fast and all that stuff. And why can't we, experiment? And well, if you haven't created an environment that's safe, people will not make mistakes because you've never made mistakes. So that's where I think you end up getting yourself in trouble as a leader.
Thanks, Christine, for sharing this like vulnerability in terms of, oh no, I've made mistakes too, and this like wisdom in terms of just how do we like grasp these kind of tough principles, right? Because these are often the conversations that are very difficult to have, right? No one often raises their hand and said, "Hey, I feel like I'm plateauing at work, or I'm struggling to get to the next level, or figure out like what I should do next, or gosh, maybe Jack, right? Like I from the outside, everything looks great, but I'm just not feeling it." So I really
Yeah.
appreciate this.
Well, I will say one of the things that I do see on Blind sometimes, and, is this dialogue around, what should I do about this, or what should I do about that? And one thing that I would encourage folks to do is to crowdsource resources as opposed to solutions.
Wow.
And so where could I get great coaching, or, what does my company offer for coaching or development experiences? Or, like we have a certain amount that folks get to spend on, but, buy a book, do an online course, we enable people to do that. And I think it's really important to find places, whether it be a coach, whether it be classes, whether it be reading books, find a way for you to get that kind of development and growth, so that you're not on your own just trying to figure it out, because it really isn't something, it's hard to just figure it out. It's going to take you longer. And so take advantage of the programs that your organizations, I mean, in tech, the number of resources people have available to them is so much higher than a lot of other industries, because those industries have smaller margins and it's much harder for them to put the money back into the employee base. But in tech, I see a wonderful amount of resources. Leverage those resources. They're giving them to you. Like, and that's going to help you in those moments where you're feeling alone, or you're feeling unsure, or you feel like, am I hitting something that nobody else has hit? Those resources can help you get back out of that place and feel more comfortable that no, you're not alone. Yes, this happens. And here are some ideas to consider, or here are some places that you could, find some help. Because we do all find those days, and especially in today's world with this rapidly changing economic environment, post COVID, post Great Resignation. Jack, you talked about it. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm looking forward to this. Is the year of the rabbit. It's supposed to be about reflection and about calm. And I keep crossing my fingers we're going to have one of those years.
That'd be nice. I could go for that. I could really go for just chill, no, nothing crazy. I would love that. That would be awesome. Hey, can I ask one last question before we head out?
Then we do have to wrap it up. I've got to go to my next meeting, but I'm
really quick, because I'm just curious about
this.
You've talked about individual contributors. And I don't know if you've heard the comment that Mark Zuckerberg made recently, where I don't want to have managers managing managers managing managers. And pretty much it was a thinly veiled threat that he's going to kind of, cut middle managers. So does that throw a wrinkle in for individual contributors who wanted to go in management, but say, yikes, maybe that's not the route anymore?
I mean, I don't know. I think that the comment is probably, I mean, I actually can't comment on kind of why he said what he said. Here's the reality is, if you have too many layers in your organization, and that's like we say, best practice is 7 layers from the CEO to the most junior person. If you have more than 7 layers in your organization, your ability to hear from that most junior level person and understand what's going on in the organization can get very, very distant. And you've got translation through translation. So, it's the game of, I told 2 friends and they told 2 friends and they told 2 friends and if you've got too many layers, you're not communicating effectively, and it's going to slow you down. So testing your org design, testing what are these jobs? Are they real jobs? Do they have real responsibilities? And I think if you've got that, then those are opportunities for people to do the right thing and to grow their career. I do think that having an individual track where people can become more and more technical and really contribute at very senior levels, like we've got that, we're putting that in place through our career framework. It's really important because if you don't want to manage people, don't do it, because it sometimes can be, you know, not fun. I mean, it is, it's hard. It's hard managing human beings. They do not behave like with ones and zeros. Human beings can do a whole range of things on any given day. But there are opportunities for people to grow. And if those jobs are meaningful, then they're valuable, then they're the right jobs to go for. So I am optimistic. I think we need to continue to develop leaders for the future. If companies get huge, they need to have some distributed decision making. And that's what great leaders can do. But not too many layers, because if you have too many layers, then that's just, you have no idea. You can't figure out what's going on in the organization. All right. Are you guys
Thank you,
good?
Christine.
I have to head off.
Yes,
Thank
let's
you
cut.
so much. How do I say thank you for this conversation? I had a good time. I hope I didn't talk too much.
This
No,
is
not at
great.
all.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Rick.
I said, no, not at all.
Well, Christine, thank you very much. You were fantastic. This is great. I don't know if you noticed, I was taking notes for this because you're saying some really great things. So like, I'm going to use this in an article. I'm getting some material here to talk about.
Good.
So
If you want to write
this was awesome.
listen,
Thank you so much.
I'm in and appreciate the time, appreciate the opportunity to speak to this audience and to talk about Pinterest. I'm excited about what we're doing, and I'm excited about the workplace, the culture that we're creating, and hopefully we stay high on that list around
looks like
folks
you
wanting
are.
to come and work for Pinterest. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.